and also to the homework presentation, the homework that we have and this presentation will be posted on Monday. So it's going to be a few days just this time around, but Marie did send out the email with the homework attachments, but this recording will get posted on Monday if you need to review it.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the Sustainable Solutions Biomimicry Workshop 2015. This is the second webinar, the April webinar. So the agenda for this class is we'll go over the intent of the class. We'll do a review of the homework that was assigned in Class 1. Talk about eyesight. I'll present one biomimicry case study, and then really talk about the biomimicry history, ethics, and philosophy, the design approach, and the first step in the design approach, which is learning about identifying your function and your context. We'll review the homework, and I'll have time to take questions and comments. So this is Marie Bourgeois. I'll be your presenter this morning. Diana Hammer, our co-presenter, will just chime in on a few important issues. So let's get started. I'm having trouble advancing the slide. Oh, here we go. Okay, someone's got their microphone on, and maybe we could mute that.
I'm trying to mute it. One more reminder for everybody, you can go on your attendee drop-down menu, find your name, and then click on the little on the icon, whether it's a phone or a speaker, and please mute yourself. Great. Okay. So the homework for last week was to develop a team slide and to introduce yourself. So we have the first one we have is team communication. And Martin, would you unmute your microphone and give us an overview of your team?
Okay, I see the slide that I put together, and in addition with Kate there, we had put together some pictures and little either poems or phrases just to capture kind of interest or flavor in our individual interests. And we called ourselves Team Communication, pretty cut and dried. What else would you like to know?
Okay, and the other part of the assignment was, well, first of all, could you talk a little bit about how you were able to, what did you do to make this slide and to get all this information put together?
Well, I just either took it off the contact list or, let's see, Kendra and Jane sent me their little, their pictures and their little poems. And as far as putting it together as a PowerPoint slide, I don't know how familiar people are with PowerPoint, but pretty cut and dry, just putting a black background and dropping everything in. I could go beyond that if there are specific questions, but I think most everyone probably has experience on PowerPoint.
Okay, great. And the second assignment was to set up a time. How is your team going to meet to complete the homework assignments? Did you discuss that with your team members?
Well, we did. You might want to get Jane on the line to tell about any plans. I didn't take care of the plans for connecting next. So. Okay. Yeah, but we did talk about how and when we're going to talk next. We just haven't done that yet.
This is Jane. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. And someone on the line is making a lot of background noise. Could you make sure that your microphone is muted? Because you're really disrupting the rest of the communication. Go ahead, Jane.
So, yeah, we did have a call. Yeah, there's a lot of noise.
Someone's blending something or having a big machine in the background?
That's me. It's the phone.
Okay, could you mute your phone? That would be great. Okay, continue, Jane.
Yeah, we did talk about sort of what our plan is. I mean, we spent quite a bit of time just talking about our interests and sort of what we hope to get out of the workshop or the course. And I think we let's see, Kendra helped set up Google Docs location so that we could start entering our information there. And I think we had decided, since everybody's pretty busy and has different schedules, that we would try using Google Docs and as a place to, and email to communicate, but that we would also try to have conference calls that we would, and to correct me if I'm wrong, if my memory's off, Martin, but we had talked about trying to use Google Docs and emails as much as we could, and then we would also schedule calls.
Okay, great. Okay, so that gives the other teams an idea. Let's go to, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great overview for team communication. Now we have the land between Little River and Fur Cap Mountains, the climate change of Fort Belknap. Is there someone from Fort Belknap who would like to talk about climate change team? If there's someone on the line who wants to talk about this, please unmute your microphone. So there, go ahead.
Elliot and Jonathan and Ina on the call. They're on this team.
Okay. Well, what we have here, I'll just go over it real quickly. It looks like they did a very similar thing, talk about their interest and who they are, put pictures on there. So this is what we're asking each team to complete in order to get this going. It's really important to set up a routine or some routine way of contacting each other. And I estimate that you'd probably have to contact your team members probably twice a month in order to complete the homework. One, to review the homework assignment and make assignments, and then who's going to take the lead on it, and then the second call to pull it all together. So it shouldn't be very lengthy, probably 2 hours a month, but let's go ahead and get that organized. So your homework for last week was really how to form your team, and what we're asking you to do is to select a team name, select some meeting times to complete your homework, and develop one team PowerPoint slide and send to myself and Diana. And so we need people from the How Does Nature Collect, Store, and Distribute Water with Minimal Energy. Is there someone from that team who would like to step up and be the lead to create this team slide? You can put it in the chat or just say, I'd like to do it. Is there someone on that team? Craig Stevenson, Peter, Jessica, Mike, Wendy, Lori, or Greg? So I'll send out an email asking one of you to step up and to organize that. That would be really helpful. And what about...
This is, I'm sorry, this is Peter. It took me a second to get unmuted.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Yeah,
who is this?
This is Peter.
Okay, Peter, would you like to take the lead to organize that team slide?
Sure. I thought we had met and someone was going to do it, but I guess that didn't happen. So,
okay, that's great. I put you down. And how about how does nature manage disturbance? So we have Rihanna, Emily, Tom, Matt, Barbara, and Ted. Is there someone on the call? Hello? Yes?
Hi, this is Raina.
Okay. Would you like to take the lead on organizing that PowerPoint for your team?
We submitted our PowerPoint.
Oh.
I can send it to you right now, but I submitted it in before the deadline.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just didn't see it. So we'll get it, and since it's already done, thank you so much. We'll present it next month. Appreciate it.
Maria, I just sent it to you right now.
Okay, thank you so much. All righty. And one other thing to note is when you submit your homework, if you could send your homework to both myself and Diana. We're co-teaching this class, and we both have pretty extensive travel schedules. And so we coordinate to receive and to prepare these webinars together. So here's our contact information again, and it's on the contact sheet. So let's dive into today's work. Reconnecting with nature means actually being in nature. And so outdoor experiences are usually highly programmed or extremely active. We, in the United States, spend a lot of time outside, but it's usually doing recreational activities. Sometimes reconnecting with nature requires slowing down without any plan in mind. You can develop a practice of reconnection through the use of eyesight. At its simplest, an eyesight is sitting and just being there for at least 25 to 30 minutes without doing anything at all in a natural setting. It doesn't matter where you are. There's something to discover anywhere you are. So usually the first 10 minutes are easy. The second 10 minutes are often challenging for some as they find themselves wandering to other non-natural things or getting bored. And I know that that's my experience a lot of times. I'm trying to learn a new approach to being in nature. So if that happens, if a thought comes up, just ignore it or let it float by. But stick with it. You haven't seen all there is to see. The next 10 minutes fly by as the world begins to reveal itself. And as with any new practice, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so a lot has been happening in nature as spring comes forth. I hope that all of you have been visiting your eyesight and relearning how to observe nature with a childlike curiosity. I'll share a few things that I've noticed in my eyesight is that spring is evolving. It's coming out. It's really amazing to me to think that the predictability of the trees budding and the turkeys looking for mates and the tulips and the birds returning, the bees swarming is my really eyesight experience this past month. Does anybody have an eyesight experience that you want to share with the class?
You know, well, you're all thinking about Marie's question. This is Diana. I guess I'll just chime in. So I took some very similar workshop with Marie in 2012, and when I first started doing my eyesights, it was challenging. Sort of like Marie is mentioning, it's so often we're busy, and we don't often we talk about quieting our cleverness and just sitting down and observing. But once I got used to it, I had a regular spot in my backyard that I go to and kind of watch how things were changing and how plants were growing and budding and blooming, and it was really enjoyable. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it. And then I also, I'm not trained as an artist at all, but the more I did it, I discovered how much I really liked to draw and sketch and adding color and looking and attention and focusing and just slowing down. So I'm interested to hear some of your eyesight experiences so far.
Well, thanks, Diana. Does anyone else have anything they want to share?
Peter.
Go ahead. Who's this? Peter?
This is Peter. Yeah, one of the things I found most interesting with doing eyesight is actually trying to sketch, which is something that I've not done before. And I've been really surprised at how pleased I am with my sketches that I'm doing. And I've really focused in on, yesterday I was just thinking about the contrast between light and dark and things I'm seeing around me. So like looking at the grass or the dirt and noticing all the different shades in it. And looking at I'm doing my eyesight by a lake near my house, and there's geese there, and looking at the coloration on the geese and the contrast between the light and the dark on them, and then looking up at the mountains off in the distance and seeing the light and the dark in that landscape, and then on the tree and the shadow, and it's just that contrast is everywhere, and I didn't really notice it before, so it's really popping out at me now as I'm actually trying to sketch it out and recreate it on my paper.
Well, thanks for that, Peter. And as Diana and you have both stated, sketching it out makes you look really deeper. So I encourage you to bring your sketch pad. So there's another eyesight suggestions in this month's homework. So continue doing that. So I wanted to present one case study, and this is about indigenous wisdom. So an architect who had studied biomimicry was called in to help design a training center that was to be sited in New Mexico. And when the firm who was building the training center came to the architect, they said, oh, and there's good news, we've done all the preliminary studies for this site, and there is no human relics found anywhere in the site, so we don't have to worry about digging for anthropology-type artifacts. It's good news. And the architect, he had a different take on it, and he thought, if no humans have ever lived here, what story did they tell us? What can we learn from that information? And so he looked at the site from a different point of view, and he found that there were three things that were really telling about this site. There were signs of activity for earthquake activity. There were places where the soil had broken in part, obviously on a fault. There was high winds in the area, and it was a funnel for fire. If a fire had raced through this area, it would have engulfed that particular landscape. And it was also high incident for flash flooding. And so he recommended to the firm that they not build this training center there because no humans had ever occupied the site. Humans had, because we're part of nature, had indigenous wisdom, and we should listen to our own organisms and the wisdom that we have. The firm went ahead and started building the training center, and there was both a fire and a flood. In fact, the flood almost took the lives of the developer's family while they were visiting the construction site. So they finally abandoned that site. So the point of this case study is that remembering that as organisms on this planet, we also have wisdom that we can put forward to solve environmental challenges. So that's how we can use the indigenous wisdom. You have anything to add, Diana?
Sure. Sometimes we call this traditional ecological knowledge, or some people refer to it as traditional environmental knowledge. And I'll just read a definition from Fikret Burks. He published a paper in with the Ecological Society of America called Rediscovery of TEK, Traditional Ecological Knowledge as Adaptive Management. It's published in 2000, but his definition is traditional ecological knowledge refers to a cumulative body of knowledge, belief, and practice evolving by accumulation of traditional ecological knowledge and handed down through generations through traditional songs, stories, and beliefs. And it concerns the relationship of living beings, so that includes humans, with their traditional groups and with their environment. And so I think in the study of biomimicry, looking at indigenous knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge, it offers a real rich complement to Western science. So because Western science and traditional ecological are both based on observation. And so by looking to TEK, I think we can learn more about how ecosystems function and the processes, and it's just a really nice interplay and fits really, I think, perfectly with the practice of biomimicry, where we look to nature to help us solve problems and as we say, create conditions conducive to life. So that's what I'd like to add.
Well, thank you. So now we're going to delve into the biomimicry history, ethics, and philosophy, because I think biomimicry isn't just about finding solutions, it's about changing our mindset. The future belongs to those who give the next generation a reason for hope, and biomimicry is one way to do this. So looking towards nature as a model for innovation is a novel, useful notion, and for many people it just rings true. Once people hear this meme, they don't often forget it, and they tend to tell others about it. So really what a meme is, it's a cultural item that is transmitted by repetition in a manner analogous to the biological transmission of genes. So it's a highly adapted gene and an idea that spreads rapidly. And so some examples of how we spread means as humans, we use songs, dances, symbols, poems, stories, are some of the ways that we spread this cultural narrative. The brand of biomimicry centers on seeking nature's advice as a guiding framework for cultural shift towards sustainable living. The Biomimicry Group has cultivated an ethos, a set of ideals and beliefs about how to consult nature and, more importantly, why to do it. So by asking the question, what would nature do, designers, architects, engineers, and innovators of all stripes ask this question and find a new revelation. It's not one new idea, but millions, ideas involved in context, tested over eons, and proven to be safe for this generation and for the next one. This trusted source of inspiration arrives just as our species is counting the casualties of our industrial crash. The models are organisms that manufacture without what we call heat, beat, and treat methods, and ecosystems that run on sunlight and feedbacks, creating opportunities rather than waste. The resulting designs are functional, sustainable, and not surprisingly, very beautiful as well. Beauty is a large part of why biomimicry resonates. It brings us back into contact with the living world, a place where we are attuned to appreciate. So why we bring in this approach is sustainability requires more than just adapting a new policy requirement. It really requires a reframing of how we solve problems. And biomimicry is one of those ways that we can use to reframe our problems and find sustainable solutions. Also, biomimicry really fits into other design paradigms. Because of its broad range, biomimicry contributes both practically and philosophically to many of the eco-design paradigms devised over the last 30 years, like the natural step, natural capitalism, the precautionary principle, the living building challenge, cradle-to-cradle ideas, ecological design, and more. So it's not one or the other. We can follow the requirements of these eco-design paradigms and use biomimicry as the way to get there. So in biomimicry, we have 3 levels. We have mimicking the form, the process, or the ecosystem. The first level is mimicking the form. You may mimic just the hooks and barbs of an owl feather to create a fabric that opens anywhere along its surface. Copying the feather design is just the beginning, and it may not yield something that is sustainable. Deeper biomimicry adds a second level, which is mimicking the natural processes or how a thing is made. The owl feather self-assembles at body temperatures without toxins or high pressures by way of nature's chemistry. The unfurling field of green chemistry attempts to mimic these benign recipes. The third level is mimicking of natural ecosystem. The owl feather is gracefully nested. It's part of an owl that is part of a forest, that is part of a biome, that is part of a sustaining biosphere. In the same way, our owl-inspired fabric must be part of a larger economy that works to restore rather than deplete the earth and its people. If you make a bio-inspired fabric using green chemistry, but you have workers weaving it in a sweatshop, loading it into pollution-spewing trucks, and shipping it long distances, you've missed the point. To mimic a natural system, you must ask how each product fits in. Is it necessary? Is it beautiful? Is it part of a nourishing food web of industries? Can it be transported, sold, and reabsorbed in a way that fosters a forest-like economy? If we can biomimic at all 3 levels, natural form, natural processes, and natural system, we'll begin to do what well-adapted organisms have learned to do, which is to create conditions conducive to life. And creating conditions conducive to life is not optional. It's a rite of passage for any organism that manages to fit in over the long haul. So how does biomimicry differ from other bio approaches? So let's go through a few of them. Bioutilization is harvesting a product or producer. It's like cutting wood for floors, even if it's from a renewable forest, or a wild crafting medicinal plants. Bioassisted involves domesticating an organism to accomplish a function. Bacterial purification of water or cows bred to produce milk are examples of bioassisted. So let me go through one example here. We'll look at abalone. So a bioutilized abalone, a well-adapted mechanism, would be sustainably harvesting of wild abalone to eat for nacre. A bioassisted, a well-adapted bioassisted approach would be natural breeding of abalone for farming. In biomimicry, a well-adapted idea is mimicry of the nacre self-assembly process to produce ceramics. In contrast, a maladapted example of bioutilization would be over-harvesting wild abalone for nacre. A maladapted bioassisted technique would be using genetic engineering to create a quote-unquote better abalone. And a maladapted biomimicry approach would be production of high-tech ceramics using heat, beat, and treat, which we already do. So let's look at the seeds of biomimicry. To succeed at biomimicry requires a kind of a mindset. And so this practice of biomimicry embodies three interconnected but unique realms: the ethos, the reconnect, and the emulate. This illustrates the ideal and deep biomimicry practice that the biomimicry group strives towards. To succeed at biomimicry requires a kind of mindset. The ethos seed forms the essence of our ethics, the intentions and underlying philosophy of why we are practicing biomimicry. In its simplest form, this ethos is our desire to fit into the planet Earth. This seed also represents our respect for, our responsibility to, and gratitude for our fellow species at home. It comes from a deep-seated belief that humans are one of many species populating the planet, each with their own inherent right to survive, yet furthermore that our survival ultimately depends on the survival of these other organisms. Each individual seed is an entry point, but all three seeds working together describe the experience and the approach that is needed. By holding this seed, the practice of biomimicry should lead towards solutions that create conditions conducive to life. It acts as a guide and creates the opportunity of choice for where, how, and when the practice of biomimicry occurs. The reconnect seed is about retaining the understanding and recognition that two separate identities, people and nature, are actually deeply intertwined. We are nature. You will have these exercises helping you connect to nature in your eyesight for each month. For some, it will be an opportunity to rebuild or discover our connection with nature. To others, it might be a first connection. The emulate seed signifies our intent to proceed as it is appropriate on the planet. Nature as our model, measure, and mentor. Emulation is the action of biomimicry and occurs when humans solve problems through bio-inspired designs and ultimately minimizes our impacts on the earth. So these represent the core values and essence of the biomimicry mean, but it also describes three different emphases through which a person might come to biomimicry. Not everyone has the same motivation or interest in the field. Most people come to biomimicry through one of the seeds first, and upon further exploration begin to more strongly align with the other seeds. The beauty is that it doesn't necessarily have to be all three in order to begin the process of biomimicry. A child may have a deep connection with nature, but really not understand the concepts of the ethos. A person may feel the responsibility to get back to the earth, yet not have a scientific understanding of biology, like myself. A person may experience biomimicry as an innovation tool before he or she realizes the aspiration of sustainability. Though emulate is only one of the 3 essential seeds of biomimicry, it's the one that audience has heard the most about and usually associated with quote-unquote doing biomimicry. Case studies of biomimicry are an easy place for people to enter and begin learning about biomimicry because it's the most tangible. A designer with a strong connection to nature discovers that biomimicry taps into an amazing wealth of knowledge about nature that could be translated to innovations in human design. But emulation is important because everyone is a designer, regardless of what discipline you may practice. It could be part of your job, or you could design something as simple as your front yard landscaping, a week of dinners, or a strategy about implementing a plan. Unlike the other seeds, emulate clearly needs a disciplined practice, the Biomimicry Methodology or Framework. We'll call it Integrating Biology into Design, or the IBD process. So the biomimicry approach, how to integrate biology into the design process, and it's applicable to any scale or discipline. Throughout human evolutionary history, there have been cultural norms that have generated expectations about how one should interact with nature. So as a human species, we've been around for about 200,000 years, and the first 190,000 years, about 95% of our timeline, our connections were utilitarian, moralistic, naturalistic, and most likely pretty negative. Life was challenging with high mortality rates, creating a fear of nature in many ways. We relied on nature, and we were surrounded by nature every day. We no doubt developed a spiritual relationship to help us understand the natural world. But just over the last 10,000 years, since the advent of agriculture, these relationships have shifted towards a more dominant relationship, seeking to tame or control nature. About 200 years ago, the utilitarian relationship took hold during the Industrial Revolution. This shift completely altered our relationship with nature, moving towards an era where we focused on what we could extract from nature in addition to how we could tame her. Roads, dams, clear cuts, fire suppression, dikes, retaining walls, these were accomplishments that were highly regarded in the human world. We even focused our scientific relationship with nature on learning further how we could control life through biotechnology, genetic engineering, pest management, animal husbandry, and more. Through the study of biomimicry, I realized that as an engineer, my job was to destroy the biological world by improving it with these kinds of structures. So what would nature do? As part of our biomimicry training, we visited the Interface Carpet Company in Georgia, as well as David Oakley's design studio. All around this studio, there were signs of nature, such as here at the design table. Sorry, there we go. You can bring nature into your space by starting a collection of interesting natural artifacts, maybe something from your own eyesight. This way, you'll be reminded to ask the question, what would nature do? David Oakley is the designer for Interface Carpet. His father was also in the carpet industry, but they manufactured wool carpet. His dad would bring carpet scraps home, and they'd use them as mulch in his garden until they switched to manufacturing nylon carpet. Initially, when Interface adopted a Mission Zero, David was told to design sustainable carpet. In order to return to wool carpet, all agricultural land in the world would have been needed to raise the sheep for the wool because we use so much carpet in our day-to-day lives. So Interface adopted a cradle-to-cradle approach, inventing a machine that turns nylon carpet into nylon fibers and PCB backing. All the fibers were dark color, mostly black. David designed carpet patterns that incorporated at least 10% of dark color in order to use this material. As the process was perfected, Interface was able to separate colors, and it was not hard to incorporate this recycled material into carpet design. When asked why he embraced biomimicry, David said, "I had just put all my money into building this design studio in Georgia, and my main and only client told me I had to. I did it to stay in business, and then I really got biomimicry." So we're going to use their site as a case study for how to incorporate biomimicry framework into decision making. So really, what does nature know about design? Researchers at Interface Carpet Company, known for its commitment to zero waste, found out what nature knows about design when they took a walk in the woods that inspired them to mimic the organized chaos of a blanket of fallen leaves. The result was their entropy line of carpet tiles. Designer David Oakley reflected that only in our synthetic world do we want perfection, one shade, no blemishes. If we can't match a carpet's color exactly, we call it a defect. So Interface was able to take the organized chaos that they found on a forest floor and incorporate it into their carpet design. So Interface sells carpet squares only, so when an area is damaged, only those specific squares need to be replaced, not the whole room. Now with the entropy line, the replacement is even easier. There's no worrying about matching dye lots, and tiles can be even placed in any direction. The entropy line is varied in color and pattern, yet when laid out together, it forms a cohesive pattern much like the floor of a forest. Considering that Interface is the world's largest carpet manufacturer, this amount of waste reduction is significant, especially when this biomimetic product now represents 40% of their carpet tile sales. So let's look at that biomimicry process. So the framework we use is one that designers should already be really familiar with. Designers already have a design process, and this framework gives context to where, how, and why biology fits into the process of any discipline or scale of design. So we call it integrating biology into design. So the scoping phase is the behind-the-scenes preparation or legwork, and that's what you're going to be working on this month in your homework, is the scoping phase. The creating phase is really the glamorous stage of design where options are explored and brainstormed, and the evaluating phase is used to determine if the goals and metrics are met. And the discovery phase, discovering biology, is really the center to the whole thing. So biology, discovering life's principles, life strategies, and adaptations feed back and forth into this biology design process. So there's not one methodology start to finish that works for all industries and all applications. In some cases, the terminology that is used in biomimicry means completely different things to different disciplines. The approach that is used here is to teach around a framework which one can learn how to, when to, and what biology to integrate into design. This diagram is meant to be less discipline dependent and instead is intended to help designers practice biomimicry while designing anything. So emulation is not a common word. In the IBD process or framework, we use emulation to mean bringing in the principles, patterns, strategies, and functions that are found in nature to inform design. With this process, there are 3 areas in which biology is most informative to the design process: in the scoping phase, in the creating phase, and in the evaluation phase. These phases, while the terminology may not be identical to how you phrase them for your discipline, appear to be present in all design processes. So in 1994, led by Ray Anderson, who's the president and owner of Interface, although he's now deceased, he started a process known as Mission Zero. It was a large-scale, vision-driven overhaul of the company designed to ultimately achieve 100% sustainability by the year 2020. They began to look at biomimicry as a design approach to help meet their objectives. Interface had many concurrent loops integrating biology into design and solving for a suite of issues, including dyeing the fabric fibers, reducing backing weight, powering their facilities, and managing their waste. Many of their innovations were inspired by life's principles, and they continue to work with these guidelines by asking the question, how would nature solve this? They have demonstrated over the last 15 years how powerful and flexible biomimicry can be in facilitating their transition to Mission Zero. And this is why I've included the Ray Anderson video in your homework. It's really an incredible story to see how they've done this. So let's take a deeper look. So in the discovering nature's genius to the creating phase, Interface Carpet used this. Through the first evolutionary step of the carpet tile emerged from a workshop where Interface design team was asked to take a walk through a forest in search of ideas. On this walk, the design team, naturally looking down as underfoot was the area of their interest, were really struck by the patterns of leaves on the forest floor. Having not undergone a formal scoping process, they did not yet have a function identified prior to their nature discovery, but rather only held in their minds. How would nature design a floor? They realized that the forest floor looked like a cohesive in design, even though the many different elements were scattered around in what was dubbed organized chaos. This design principle inspired the idea that no two floor tiles had to be exactly the same. Any tile would look comfortable sitting next to any other, regardless of dye lot, direction, or weave. And it led to the interface to create the world-famous and widely popular entropy carpet design. Traditional carpet tiles should all match and use the same dye lot. But with this phase, with the entropy carpet tile, you could put it in any direction. In the evaluating and scoping phase, they began to look deeper and to identify deeper functions within the realm of carpet tiles, like how to adhere, how to provide cushioning, how to create color, resist stains, manage urine, acquire materials, and power the assembly of materials. All the functions of carpet tile manufacturing. They added some guidelines to the questioning that ruled out solutions that might be deemed unsustainable. Spurred by their success with the entropy of the innovation team began to challenge themselves to innovate around specific problems. Biomimicry shifted Interface's philosophy of design. They began to frame their challenges as, how would nature do this, and turned to biologists at the design table for help. One big challenge was the use of glues that off-gas volatile organic compounds during installation and afterwards. Conventional carpet tiles are glued to the floor, and this off-gassing is a health both for installers and occupants. So it virtually eliminates any chance of recycling the carpet at the end of use. So to solve this problem, the team quickly realized that the gecko might have a good solution for their carpets. Instead of glues, geckos use van der Waals forces, which are intermolecular force, rather than chemistry to attach to their surface. So in here, they're going from the discovery phase to evaluating, back to the discovering phase, and reevaluating. The team evaluated various lab efforts to emulate the gecko and ultimately ruled that the technologies were still too new to be commercially viable. They went on then to explore nature-inspired glues, but various evaluations sequentially ruled out each one. So what was their answer for adhering carpet? With the help of a biologist at the design table, the team came to realize that nature doesn't often use glue, especially if other options that require less energy and material exist. Likewise, life generally doesn't use glue when it only wants a temporary hold. When Interface asked themselves what they really wanted to do, they realized their function was to hold material down to the floor. They wanted to hold the carpet down. In their own eureka moment, they recognized that gravity is the most universal mechanism for holding things down. As we saw in the last webinar, it's one of Earth's operating conditions. So in the creating phase, they recognized that if they could attach the tiles to each other, collectively the large carpet would weigh enough that gravity would do the work of glue. They knew that their solution would need to be sustainable. So after several iterations, they invented the tactile. The tactile is a thin postage-sized patch that uses a layer of low VOC glue on one side to attach tiles to each other at their corners, creating conglomerates of tile that act as a wall-to-wall or area rug. This eliminated the needs to glue the tile to the floor, evolving the product yet again, providing for faster installation time, more flexibility, healthier air quality, and easier recycling. So this is really the process that they went to. So it's not just one phase to the other. In designing with biology, you often go through many different kinds of processes, and you go back and forth through discovering phases, creating, scoping, and evaluating. So for this month's homework, let's look at the scoping phase. In general, scoping occurs prior to the actual design and includes preparatory work determining the project's challenges, collecting and analyzing the facts, setting the project goals, and harmonizing the project team. So we've already begun harmonizing the team by getting the teams to join together and see when they're going to meet. The scoping also sets the vision for the project. It provides the opportunity for stakeholders to unite behind a common aspiration, focus on priorities, and set performance standards. The project scope is a chance to determine which goals are non-negotiable and which goals are areas to be monitored for improvement. When it comes to creating a sustainable design, the scoping phase is the time to set the bar as high as possible at the start. Realizing the current system we're all tied to will likely eat away at the edges with that expansive vision. The product of the scoping phase is a brief written explanation outlining the background, context, goals, and constraints. So from a biological what we try to do in these designs is the vision you may come up with when you design for nature may seem to be incredibly lofty. But Peter Senge of the Society for Organizational Learning uses a rubber band metaphor to describe how you can leverage the creative tension inherent in that vision. He said that tension is a stretched rubber band that is like the tension in between idealistic vision and reality. He advises using that creative tension to pull reality up to the vision rather than letting reality pull the vision down and dumbing down your idea. So that's one of our goals in solving these environmental challenges, is to really set a high vision and work and use that tension to meet that vision. So in integrating biology to design, a well-adapted biological strategy must meet all the functional needs of the organism in the context in which it lives in order to contribute to survival. And we can say the same thing about a well-adapted design. So from a biological perspective, this lesson could be described as the biological strategy to meet the functional needs of the organism in the context in which it lives. As part of your team homework, go through the scoping exercise and identify the goal, the context, the constraints of your challenge. For example, if the goal of the organized team is, the goal of the communicate team is to develop a better way to communicate, What are the constraints that this team must work around? What are the rules that are non-negotiable by either the guidelines that you're using in your organization or other constraints that are outside your area of influence? Really understanding the challenge to be solved and the constraints in which they must be solved helps ensure a more successful outcome. Success, however, cannot be defined in multiple ways, and one person's version of success might not be nature's version of success, which is survival of the species. So one of the functions a design must achieve in context is to succeed on Earth. That's exactly what life's principles are, the design lessons shared by all organisms for survival on this planet, and bringing life's principles into the scoping phase as a non-negotiable requirement. You're setting the ultimate guidelines for success. So how do you integrate biology into the design? So let's break it into two parts for the scoping phase: function and context. Function is what you want your design to do, not what you want your design to be. For example, one of the original functions of the bullet train was to carry people from one location to another. It's fast, over 200 miles an hour. When adding the function of doing it quietly, it changed the design to include some new constraints. When the designer took a step further to incorporate biology into the design, he asked the question, how does nature move soundlessly from one media to another without causing a disturbance? The practice of understanding function is really simple. Do you want a light bulb, for example, which is a noun, or do you want to illuminate, which is a verb? All functions can be captured in verb form: provide shelter, create color, cushion impact, communicate freely, avoid collision, lubricate, retain water, structure a system, adapt to climate change. By default, the tendency slips into what we can picture or imagine in our minds, which is usually an object, a noun, rather than a process or an event unfolding over time. As soon as we can begin to turn the static picture into an active movie in our minds, it's possible to discover a function. However, be forewarned, the first function identified is usually not the ultimate function. It often reflects a predisposition to a desired or assumed outcome or design solution. You can get to the real function by asking the question why many times. For example, why do you want to communicate? We want to inform. Why do you want to inform? Maybe your answer is because you want to change behaviors. Another example is, why do you want a water filter? Well, you want to filter water. Why do you want to filter water? Well, you really want to remove particulates. Why do you want a headquarters building? And this is a photograph of the EPA building in downtown Denver. Well, we want to bring staff together. Why do you want to bring staff together? Well, to improve communications. And why do you want to improve communications? Well, maybe you want to create positive feedback loops. As you can see, with each of these rounds of question and answer, the potential solution to the challenge is redefined. As a result, determining function may require hours, days, or months just to get a clear concept of what a function the design needs to perform. So that's your homework for this month. This diagram is a comprehensive look at the functions of life. It's the Biomimicry Taxonomy, and I've included this file in your homework assignment. And just about every human challenge to be solved using biomimicry should have a corresponding function on the taxonomy. When you and your team are struggling to identify function, the taxonomy can provide some ideas. It also sets the basis of how to use asknature.org. It's based on this taxonomy. so you can access this and look at it for your homework this month. If you plan to bring biology into the creative phase, you can test how well you have defined the function by asking the question, how does nature perform this function? Asking how does nature do this, called biologizing the question. In my practicum for the biomimicry degree, our program team challenge was to help the Cuyahoga River Valley to develop land use policies based on biomimicry. We determined that nature does not develop policies and implement policies. Nature actually follows the policy of life's principles. So our function in answering this question was to develop mechanisms to incorporate life's principles into products and processes in the Cuyahoga River Valley, as an example. The second part of your homework is to define the context, and this is under what conditions do you have to meet this function. Understanding functions can bring considerable light to the challenge. It does not guarantee a solution will be viable. Likewise, while it broadens the solution space considerably, it can actually create a space too vast to explore reasonably. This is where context comes in. That is, under what conditions, circumstances, scenarios, constraints, laws, budgets, systems, etc., must the solution meet its defined function. Incorporating context considers the end user, the end use, the supply, the distribution, the economics, and how the design functions in space and time. Ultimately, a truly sustainable design incorporating context considers how the solutions fit into the larger scope of life. So for your homework, you need to identify the function that you want to achieve by asking why many times, and to list any of the contexts that you think are important. For example, on the team for how to adapt, you want to adapt in a very localized area. What are the boundaries that you're going to develop an adaptation plan for? That would be part of your context. So we've covered a lot of information in this webinar about how we view biomimicry, the biomimicry meme, how biomimicry differs from other bio approaches. We looked at the design process that interfaced carpet used initially to develop nature-based carpet. We learned about the value of following a design process and how function and context is valuable in the scoping phase of solving our challenges. Teams with designers as members will have an easier time with this month's homework, just as teams with biologists will enjoy that expertise in future assignments. So this is an opportunity to learn more about each of the disciplines and their role in biomimicry. So we have a few more minutes. I'll open it up to any questions. Like I said, the homework sheet is sent out in email, and it will be posted on Peaks to Prairie on Monday. So you're going to learn about function. There's a function exercise to help you practice identifying functions. I recommend you do that together as a team. It'd be a quick exercise. And also identify your goals, your context, and your functions and your constraints for your challenge. You can watch the Ray Anderson video and conduct your eyesight. Is there any questions?
Marie, there was a question online, which was,
okay.
Could you expand on what is meant by non-negotiable rules within your organization?
Okay. That means if you have something within your, let's say, and I'll just use the communication team again as an example, if they want to communicate about sustainability within their organization, but they have certain rules like communication, outreach must go through these 3 people for approval, or you must use this logo on all of your communication. Those would be non-negotiable rules for your organization, so you couldn't violate those rules. For the team, for the water team, for example, there might be very significant regulations about collecting water. What is the water law in the state of Montana would be an important constraint that you could not overcome. You couldn't change the water law to implement a biomimicry example. You might recommend a change in the law, but for this project that would be a constraint. Does that answer your question, whoever put that up there? Any other questions or comments? We're a little over time, but we have time to take a few more.
You know, there's another question from the water team. This is Diana. Can you help our team in providing more specific context in what are challenges with water? So I might just jump in there.
Yeah.
The water team is the area of focus is the Flathead Reservation in western Montana, and it's the home to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And Mike Derglow with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, he's their environmental director, and Whisper Means, she's a wildlife biologist. Both have offered to assist the water team with some helping you further define context and some of the specific water challenges that the tribes face, and help to come up with a challenge that would that's more specific and that would be really useful for the tribe. The water team in touch with, if that helps.
Okay, and both Diana and I are available to help your team work through that. It's really important to identify the correct function. For example, in 2012, we had another team communicate that wanted to communicate about sustainability to develop a better sustainability program at the Grand Canyon National Park. And in really asking the question why many times, they found that really communication wasn't the function at all. In their particular instance, they didn't have a sense of community within the employees at the park. And so how does nature develop communities that thrive became their function, because people who feel part of a community are more apt to engage in collective sustainability efforts. So in their case, they changed their function from communicate to community. So please contact either Diana or I. We'd be glad to sit in on some of your team calls or speak to individuals to make sure that you're getting the correct function. So again, go ahead.
Sorry.
We're asking each team to develop one slide that identifies their function and context and send it to Diana and I, and so we can share with the rest of the teams next in the May webinar.
And I was on that communicate team that changed our, after asking why many times, we did change, like Marie said, our question about building community rather than how to communicate. And I can share our report with the communicate team to kind of give you an example. So I'll send that to the communicate team.
Okay, and just remember that those final reports are also on the Peaks to Prairie webpage. Well, we've gone 2 minutes over, so let's go ahead and end the recording. And if you have questions or comments, please email either Diana or I. And